Welcome, everybody. Great to have you guys here, whether you're joining us online or attending in person at one of our three Parker Hill locations. And this is a great weekend to be here because today we are beginning a brand new 4-week teaching series. And during this series, we're going to be talking about our future together as a church and how we can make the greatest possible impact here in northeastern Pennsylvania. Now, as most of you know, our leadership believes that the best next step for us is to join forces with another multi-site church here in Pennsylvania. So over these next 4 weeks, I'm going to be talking about why I believe that a merger is the best path forward for Parker Hill Church and why it will help us become even more effective in accomplishing our mission. In fact, here's the bottom line of this entire 4-week series in 2 simple words: better together. We really believe that we can be better together. There was an interesting story in the news a couple of years ago about a small bookstore in Southampton, England, called October Books. And they had outgrown their rented space and decided to buy a building of their own. In fact, their new building was just down the street, about 1/10 of a mile away from their current building. So they renovated the new building, and then the day came when it was time to make the move. And they had to move thousands of books from their old location to the new location. And here's how they did it. They put out word to their customers and neighbors and friends and invited them to come to what they called a book moving party. And about 200 people showed up, and they formed a human chain and simply passed the books down the sidewalk from the old building to the new one. And in less than 1 hour, they moved over 3,000 books into a new home. I thought that was very cool. But when you get a group of people with a common mission, all playing their part, it's amazing what can happen. We are better together. Now, our job is not just to get books into a new building. Our job as a church is to get hope and forgiveness and salvation into the hearts of people. And we believe that we can do that better together. So I'll be taking the next few weeks to talk about why we can be better together. And today, as I begin, I want to talk about our mission as a church, because we as a church have a God-given mission. And if you've been around here for a while, you've heard me say this phrase many times. Here's how we say it. Our mission is to help people find the way back to God. To help people find the way back to God. And that mission statement is really just a reflection of the heart of Jesus, because here's what he said about his mission in Luke chapter 19. He said, the Son of Man, he would describe himself that way sometimes, the Son of Man came to seek and to save the lost. That was his mission. That's why he had come into this world. And in order to accomplish that mission, Jesus went all the way to a cross. He was willing to pay the ultimate price to seek and save the lost, to help people find the way back to God. Let me show you a picture of a stuffed animal. This was my daughter's. She got this when she was 5 years old. It was a gift from her small group leader here at church. And oddly enough, she never gave him a real name. We just called him Doggy. And when my daughter was very young, she was really attached to this stuffed animal. For a while, she wouldn't go to bed at night without him. And if we went anywhere in the car, Doggy would have to come along. Even sitting and watching TV, Doggy would be right there next to her. And even though he got more and more raggedy looking over the years, that didn't change the way she felt about him. So there was this one time when my daughter was about 8 years old that we went away for a couple of days, and we stayed at a hotel. Of course, Doggy had to come along with us. But then as we were driving home, we discovered that Doggy was nowhere in the vehicle. Apparently, he was still back in the hotel room. And when we realized that he had been left behind, let me tell you, there was much weeping and gnashing of teeth. And so when we got home, the very first thing I did was look up the phone number for the hotel and call them and initiate a search. And thankfully, they called back in about an hour and told us that they had found Doggy wrapped up in the bed sheets, and they were able to rescue him just before he went into the washing machine. So I gave them my credit card number over the phone to pay the cost of shipping him back, and I even paid for next day delivery. Let me tell you, I'm 100% sure that the shipping fee was more than the original cost of Doggy. So here's the question: why would I go to all that trouble for a stuffed animal? Here's why: because I love my daughter. And if I love my daughter, then I love what she loves. And if something she loves is missing, then I'm going to help her get it back. And I think that's a great picture of our mission as a church. We are called to do whatever it takes to help people who matter to God but are far from God find the way back to God. Now, as we talk about our mission today, I'd like to focus your attention on one passage of Scripture. It's found in the Gospel of Luke, chapter 15. And this is a part of the Bible, honestly, that really resonates with me because 33 years ago, when I was trying to figure out what to do with my life, this chapter in the Gospel of Luke was pivotal in my decision to invest my life in leading a church. And these words continue today to motivate me and remind me of why we exist and what we ought to be doing in this world. So here in Luke chapter 15, Jesus tells a story. He tells a parable. It's a story about a shepherd and a lost sheep. And this story is actually the first of 3 stories that Jesus tells in consecutive order. He begins with a story about a lost sheep, then a story about a lost coin, and then finally the famous parable of the lost son, the prodigal son. Now, Jesus never told stories just to entertain the crowds. Whenever he told a parable, he did so to illustrate truth, to drive home a point. And all 3 of these stories were told to drive home one point, the same point. And I would suggest that if Jesus used 3 different stories in a row to make one point, that tells us that the point he was making must have been very, very important. And so in the first 2 verses of this chapter, we discover right away why Jesus told these parables, these stories. Verse 1, here's how it begins. Now the tax collectors and sinners were all gathering around to hear him. Now, please understand, these were not the respectable people of society. These were not religious people. These were people who were far from God. And it's interesting to me, as you read through the Bible, one of the amazing things you discover is that the most irreligious people in that culture were drawn to Jesus. They were not repelled by him. They were not offended by him. They were drawn to him. And that was the case on this day. But as these tax collectors and sinners gathered around Jesus, there was another group of people nearby. Look at verse 2. It says, "But the Pharisees and the teachers of the law muttered, 'This man welcomes sinners and eats with them.'" So these guys were the religious leaders of that day. They were the good people, very sincere, very religious, very upright, but very misguided, because they were completely upset by the fact that Jesus would welcome sinners and eat with them. Because according to their way of thinking, if you were really a good and godly person, then you would keep your distance from people like these tax collectors and sinners. They were shocked to see Jesus reaching out to those people. Now, Jesus knew they were muttering and what they were muttering about, and he knew that their attitude did not at all reflect the heart of God. He knew that they had lost sight of the mission. So verse 3, Jesus tells them a story. Here's how it begins. Then Jesus told them this parable. "Suppose one of you has 100 sheep and loses one of them." Now, we might read that and say, what's the big deal? The guy only lost one of his sheep and he still has the other 99. Why worry about just one? Like that's a 1% loss, just the cost of doing business, right? But that is not the way a shepherd in that culture would ever think. Because to a shepherd, the sheep were not just a source of income. They were not just livestock. There was a deep bond that developed between a shepherd and his sheep. And if just one of them was missing, that represented a great loss to the shepherd. So here's what the shepherd does. Verse 4, Jesus says, "Does he not leave the 99 in the open country and go after the lost sheep until he finds it?" In the 1800s, there was a British artist named Alfred Sword who captured this verse in a famous painting. And in his painting, the sheep is halfway down a steep cliff and the shepherd is hanging over the edge, literally risking his own life to save this one wayward sheep. And that is an accurate picture because Middle Eastern shepherds would do anything to rescue that one that was missing. It's not that the other 9 were unimportant. He cared about them just as much, but they were safe. So he would leave them behind and go out and risk his life to search for the one. There was a sense of urgency, a sense of priority about the one that was missing, the one that was lost and wandering. Let me keep reading as Jesus continues here. Verse 5, and when he finds it, he joyfully puts it on his shoulders and goes home. Then he calls his friends and neighbors together and says, rejoice with me, I have found my lost sheep. Now again, Jesus never told stories just for entertainment value. There was always a point behind every parable he told. And in verse 7, he drives home the point. I tell you, he said, that in the same way there will be more rejoicing in heaven over one sinner who repents than over 99 righteous persons who do not need to repent. The point is this: when just one person turns to God, there is a party that breaks out in heaven. And if we are going to be a church that mirrors the heart of God, then we have to care about what he cares about. We have to care about those who are still out there, those who are lost, those who are wandering. We as a church are not here to preserve tradition. We are not here to create a comfortable place for religious people to hang out together. We are here to carry out the mission that Jesus began 2,000 years ago, to change the world one life at a time, one heart at a time, one person at a time, to help people find the way back to God. But here's the challenge. Here's the challenge. The gravitational pull of every church is to just become a church for church people. There is a natural tendency to drift toward focusing on insiders, and by insiders, I mean the people who already believe the truth, the ones who are already safe inside the fold, the 99. In fact, that was kind of my story. I grew up in a family where we went to church every time the doors were open, literally 3 or 4 times a week. And it was a good church. It was a really good church, a place where the Bible was taught. And it was the sort of church where, everybody kind of knew everybody else. And it would be the same people in the same seats every week. And if you knew the routine and you understood the subculture, it was a good experience. But to be honest, we rarely saw anyone come to Christ. Almost all the baptisms that occurred in the church I grew up in were baptisms of kids whose parents had raised them in the church. And sometimes new people would visit, but they almost never came back because we were a church that was designed for church people. It was a church full of great people, godly people, but looking back, I think we had lost sight of the mission. And one of the biggest problems in churches today is the tendency for us church people to lose sight of the mission, to forget why we're here, and to just focus on ourselves. And as I've thought and I've prayed about this decision to pursue a merger, there is one question that constantly comes to the surface for me. Here's the question: will this advance the mission? Will this advance the mission? And I'm sure many of you have lots of questions about the details of a merger. We're going to answer those questions over the next couple of months. But the one question that must overshadow every other question is this one: will this advance the mission? In fact, for the last 33 years, we have tried to ask that question with every major decision we've made. Will this advance the mission? Not will this be easy. Not will everyone agree. Not are other churches doing this. But one question: will this advance the mission? I remember way back in 1990, we had reached capacity in our building. We were just one location, one service in a room that would seat about 75 people. And we needed to move from one worship service to 2 worship services on Sunday mornings. And that was not a popular idea because we all liked the fact that we could all be together in one room. And there were some of our folks back then who didn't like the idea that they wouldn't see their friends at church on Sunday because maybe their friends were attending at a different service time. And so we had to come back to this question: will this advance the mission? I remember in the early 90s, we began to slowly change the music style in our worship gatherings because we wanted to take the timeless message of the gospel and communicate it through music that would connect with a new generation. And let me tell you something, making those changes was not easy. Some of us missed the church music that we grew up with. Some people were very uncomfortable with those changes. Some people were downright angry. But we had to keep coming back to this question: will this advance the mission? In 1999, we thought it would be a good idea to change the name of the church because the name of the church at that time was kind of confusing, and we felt it was also a barrier for some people who might want to attend. Not everyone was in favor of a name change for a number of reasons, but we had to keep coming back to this question: will this advance the mission? And our members voted to change our name to Parker Hill. In 2004, our building was maxed out. We had, at that point, 5 services every weekend. It's a good thing we got away from one service. And we had to have 5 services just to accommodate our growth in attendance. And we had just merged ourselves with another church, and they had given us their building, but we weren't sure what to do with it. So we decided to try something that was very new at that time, something called multi-site ministry. And it was complicated. And it was something that none of us had ever seen before. And lots of people, honestly, didn't think they'd be interested in watching a sermon on video. But we just kept coming back and coming back and coming back to one question: will this advance the mission? And by God's grace, we have been able to help thousands of people in northeastern Pennsylvania find the way back to God. And it's been my life's joy and my great privilege to be a part of this church and watch how God has used all of you to change hearts and heal families and restore hope. But listen, I don't know if any of that could have happened if we had not been laser focused on the mission. And so now, when it comes to a merger, the most important question we can ask is the same question we've been asking for decades: will this advance the mission? In other words, will this help us be even more effective at bringing light to the darkness here in northeastern Pennsylvania? And I believe that the resounding answer to that question is yes. Now, you might be thinking, well, Mark, how does a merger help us advance the mission? In other words, how exactly can we be better together? And I'll just give you 3 examples for today, and every week I'll just expand on this and give you more examples. But here's the first reason. Together is better for succession. Together is better for succession. Back in November, I let you guys know that I'll be wrapping up my time here by the end of this year. And that's been a very difficult decision for me. There are a lot of emotions that surface when I think about that. But I'm convinced that it's best for me to make a shift into something that doesn't have the leadership pressures and the deadline pressures that come with my current role in this church. And here's the thing: leadership transitions in a large church like ours can be very challenging. And the longer the tenure of a senior pastor, the more difficult that transition can be. And so we believe that the best way to ensure a smooth leadership transition in this church is through a merger with a like-minded church. In fact, let me read just a paragraph from a book on church mergers written by Jim Tomberlin. He writes this: succession by merging with a respected local church pastor with a proven track record who is already culturally acclimated is far less risky than the traditional nationwide pastor search process. And we originally had sought to develop a successor, someone to take my place from within our staff, and spent about 5 years doing that, and that just didn't work out. But now we believe that aside from that, together is better for succession. Let me tell you the second thing here: together is better for collaboration. Here's what I mean by that. Right now, our church and LCBC Church do a lot of the same things. And by joining forces, we can do some of those things together. And the result will be a better outcome with less effort. Give you a couple examples. One example, right now, both of our churches broadcast our worship services online. We both use the same style of music, and we have a very similar approach to teaching the Bible. So you could tune in to either one of our online broadcasts and get pretty much the same worship experience. Now, you may not realize this, but it takes a great deal of time, effort, and technology to take what we do in our live worship services and turn that into a good online experience. It just requires a lot of resources. In a merger, we won't have to maintain 2 different online broadcasts. We will have one. And it will be a high-quality online experience. And then, when somebody is ready to move beyond watching online to attending in person, they can walk into one of 18 church locations in eastern and central Pennsylvania. That is the power of collaboration. And that's why I believe we are better together for the mission. Here's another example of what I'm talking about with collaboration. For many years, both of our churches have organized retreats and camp experiences for our middle school students and high school students. In fact, some years we actually ended up booking the same retreat facilities a week or 2 apart from each other. But here's the thing, by combining efforts, we can create even better camp and retreat experiences for our students from both churches. In fact, that's exactly what we're doing this summer. Our middle school students have been invited to join hundreds of other students for a 4-day summer camp experience called Wildfire. And regardless of whether or not we merge, we're going to be jumping in with LCBC on this summer camp. Some of you are parents of middle school students, so let me share a few details. Wildfire Camp is July 18th through the 21st, and it's for students in grades 5 through 8. And if you sign up before the end of April, the church will pay the first $100 of the early bird registration fee through our Evan Kongvold Scholarship Fund, which has been generously blessed. And so your cost will only be $175. That includes transportation, food, housing, and the whole experience. Let me tell you something. If you have a middle school student, you will save that much in grocery money by sending your kid to this camp. Seriously, though, you do not want your kids to miss this. It will be an incredible experience, a life-changing experience for them, and we are excited to team up with LCBC Church for that summer camp experience because together is better for collaboration. And let me say one more thing for this week. Together is better for northeastern Pennsylvania. Over the years at the leadership level, we've talked about and dreamed about adding Parker Hill campuses in new locations here in northeastern Pennsylvania. In fact, we have people who ask us if we would open a Parker Hill campus in their town. But to be honest, on our own, it would be a long, long, long time before that would be possible. But in a merger, we will be in a much better position in terms of resources and momentum because we will be part of a much larger movement, a group of thousands of believers who are bearing the load together. And together we can move forward faster. In fact, we've already started talking about locations around us in the Northeast that need a church in their community and where we can go next if we choose to merge. So here's the bottom line as we think about a merger. The most important question we can ask is this question: will this advance the mission? Every other question is secondary. In other words, when we look back 10 years from now, will more people in NEPA be in God's family because of this decision? I believe the resounding answer is yes. I believe with all my heart that we are better together. Now, let me tell you what's going to happen over the next 8 weeks. I'm going to take the next 3 weeks to just share my heart with you and talk about this from a biblical perspective. And then throughout the month of May, you will have a number of opportunities to get more information, to ask your questions, to get clarity on this decision. And let me tell you what some of those upcoming opportunities are. We're going to have 4 what we're calling vision meetings. So I'll be joined by David Ashcraft from LCBC Church. We'll talk about the vision for a merger, and then you'll have the opportunity to ask questions about a number of different aspects of this. We're also planning some LCBC open houses, and here's what that is. During the month of May, you'll have the opportunity to visit a nearby LCBC location, attend a worship service, and get a guided tour. And you can sign up for one of those online at parkerhill.org/LCBC. Then also, there's going to be something called the First Steps class. First Steps is a class that LCBC offers to anyone who is new to their church. And it's kind of an overview of their DNA and their strategy and their ministry. It's about a 90-minute class, and you'll have 2 opportunities to attend this in person at our Dixon City campus, or you can take the class online. Just look it up on parkerhill.org/LCBC. Now, in addition to all of that, we've published a view book that goes along with this teaching series. We're going to be mailing a copy of this to everyone who calls Parker Hill their church. For those of you who are attending in person today at one of our locations, we're going to hand you one of these on your way out, so you will get a copy today. This booklet will help you understand our vision behind this idea. And at the end, we ask and answer 23 of the most common questions people tend to have about a merger. So do me a big favor, take a copy of that on your way out, or when you get one in the mail, take the time to read through it very, very carefully. And after you've read through it, let us know what questions you have, because we want to answer any questions you have. Now, for those of you attending in person, we're also going to hand you on your way out today a 2020 Impact Report from LCBC Church. This is an overview of what they've accomplished during the year 2020, and I think you'll be very encouraged, even inspired by reading that. Now, all the information I just mentioned is also available online. You can get all these resources in digital format. Just go to parkerhill.org/LCBC, and there you'll find information about vision meetings, church tours, first steps, and all that other great stuff. So, here's why we're doing all this. We're doing all this because we want to share as much information as we can with as many people as we can. Because we know that this is a very complicated decision, and we want you to be able to process this with accurate information, not hearsay, not conjecture, not just emotion. So we're going to spend the next 2 months talking, sharing information, and answering questions about this. So take advantage of these opportunities. Get the information, ask your questions, seek clarity on this, because I'll tell you, I am more excited than ever about the future of this church and what God may still have in store for us. And I want you to see what I can see and have the same sense of excitement that I do. Well, I've been talking for long enough, so I want to let you hear from some good friends of mine who are part of LCBC Church. So please watch this with me.
We have a history with Parker Hill that started in 1988.
As college freshmen.
And Mark Stenzi had just started there the year before.
And the church was teeny tiny.
Yeah.
Really small. We used to do Sunday night services out underneath a tree in the back with one guitar.
4 years of Bible college, we were part of the church just serving. And then another 3 years when I was in seminary, we were serving at the church as well. From 2002 to 2015, then we were on staff at Parker Hill. So really most of our adult life, since we got married, with the exception of a 5-year period we were in New Jersey, has been
at
Parker Hill up until 2015. And man, we just got to see hundreds and hundreds of people give their life to Jesus, grow in their relationship with Jesus.
We got to be a part of being a church that was doing things differently and that was actually reaching people, and people were coming to Christ and they were growing and lives were being changed, and we got to be a part of that.
We left Parker Hill back in 2015 because of a health need happening in our family. We moved to get near our family that had relocated to Lynchburg, Virginia. So it was a tough decision to leave a place that we had so much history, not knowing what was going to happen in the future. We felt God speaking to us that we were supposed to say yes to this opportunity at LCBC. And that was a hard decision because it meant leaving our family. What just seemed to be clear in that decision-making process was that, well, one, we had 20 years of relationships in Pennsylvania, and somehow this move to LCBC had to do not just with what was happening in New York in that specific role that I would have there, which we knew we wanted to be there and be part of what was happening in New York, but somehow this fit into God's bigger plan. We didn't even know what that meant. So when we first heard of this potential partnership with Parker Hill, it was like just a light bulb going on for me. It was almost like,
of course.
Now this makes sense. This only God could orchestrate something like that.
It's this whole idea that we're better together. We're better together in ministry. We're better together in our marriages. I think we're better together as a church. and as several campuses in different locations, we can do more, we can give more, we can reach more.
Part of the vision that we had at Parker Hill, as we looked at Northeast Pennsylvania with 540,000 people, the vision was to reach 10,000 people in that footprint. And I know here at LCBC, we have a vision to reach 100,000 people in the state of Pennsylvania. And man, immediately my mind went to, what if together we could reach that 10,000 people even faster? And what if that 10,000 people in Northeast Pennsylvania was part of the 100,000 that we at LCBC have a vision to reach?
I'm excited to be back a part of Parker Hill and excited for them to be able to join and be a part of LCBC and what's going on here. It's going to be stronger because there's more of us together.
Why I'm excited about this partnership is I truly believe that it's about reaching as many people as possible, as effectively as possible, as long as possible. And I see this partnership as a way to reach even more people in Northeast Pennsylvania. It's all about the mission, introducing people to Jesus,
It's
together fully following
all
him.
about those people who need Jesus and they don't even know it.
Yep.
The heart is the same. The mission is the same.
And to me, it's like, if we can reach more together, why would we not do that?